I wanted to come to each of you and ask you, what does trust mean to you, your company, and specifically within your role and the work that you do? So if we could, maybe I'll come to you first, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, it really means that I can rely on someone to do the things that they say they're going to do, even when it's hard. I think for Vancity and our members, it's and their financial well-being, it's in good hands, their money's protected. And when they need good financial advice, they can rely on us to give them the information that's in their best interests. As the leader of cybersecurity, I need to make sure our systems are safe and protected from bad actors, those that would use any means to take away that financial well-being of our members, disrupt our systems, and cause us reputational harm. That's what it takes to create and maintain the trust that we've built up in over 80 years in business.
Thank you. I'll pass it over to Zac. What does trust mean in your role?
Yeah, thanks, Erica. I appreciate it. Listen, from a company perspective, we really operate at the intersection of an individual or a business and the digital service provider. So think about like when you're signing up for a bank account or jumping into an Uber, or if your company is building your digital payment setup, things like that. So trust for us is really answering three seemingly straightforward but horribly complex questions. So first one is like, who is Zac and is he really there? The second, is Zac a fraudster or trying to commit some kind of financial crime? And the third is, should we submit and allow credit to Zac? So these are critical steps for the digital economy, for internet commerce to function, and for all of us to safely transact online. So that's really what trust means for us as a business and how we build our product. For me as a leader, simply put, it's most people perform best when there's like a shared understanding of success and failure. That's sort of how I think about it. So as long as we're aligned on what it takes to succeed, and we all know that it's okay to fail from time to time, then that really is what trust is defined. So it means different things to different people, but it really is what fundamentally shapes sort of how a team environment then operates. And so for anyone listening wanting to implement a broader core or rules of engagement when it comes to doing things the way they think they should be done and being okay with results as they are, that's sort of how we think about trust in our operating environments.
That's excellent. Thank you, Zac. Matt, how about you at Absolute? You're deeply embedded in trust, certainly, but what does it mean to you and in your role?
We are. Well, you said some operative words there. We are deeply embedded in trust. In fact, it's at the very center of who we are as an organization. We distinguish ourselves as a cybersecurity vendor by being what we call rooted in trust, which means we are built into the trusted firmware of most of the computers that we can buy or enterprises can buy. And so effectively, we can come kind of preloaded in an untamperable, undeletable state in those computers. So trust in cybersecurity or trusted position within the computer is literally existentially part of who we are. In my role in particular as Chief Customer Officer, I think it's where trust comes into the equation is how do we take that privileged position we have in the firmware of computers and extend that to a place where customers receive value from that. So how are we enabling them? How are we supporting them? How are we teaching them? How are we removing barriers? And how are we authentically describing the value that they get vis-a-vis our platform against a heavily regulated, compliance-driven environment to ensure that they're getting the value that they sought out to achieve through our platform.
Thank you. And Tomy, coming over to you next. Can you talk about trust in your role?
Yeah, and it's similar to what Zac mentioned, is we're pretty much in the same industry. It's really determining whether or not that person is who they say they are. At Mastercard, for us, it's not just a brand promise. It's something that we really have to build into our products. So everything that we do in identity decisioning is really about ensuring that our customers lower their fraud rates, increase their approvals, and feel confident that these outcomes are actually happening with privacy in mind and security built in from the start. So to me, like, that just means that our decisions and our data make sense. They're predictable, they're explainable. If our clients are approving someone, denying someone, or stepping up a user, providing friction, we should be able to explain why we did it, if we get it wrong, be able to correct it and do it transparently. In my specific role, I'm responsible for making sure that that trust is measurable, making sure that our clients see real improvements in their conversion rates or reductions in fraud, account takeover, and ensuring that their teams are spending more time on actual work rather than manually reviewing applications. So it just means making sure that we're really partnering closely with our product teams, our legal teams, and privacy to make sure that our customers are fully compliant and are always moving together and not in conflict.
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll dig a bit deeper. I thought it was interesting in the poll, our audience said they're thinking a lot about customer acquisition. And so I think that, when trust is a product, maybe let's talk a little bit about how that changes how you sell, build, and position your technology. So Zac, I'm going to come over to you first. As you said, Trulioo operates in the center of digital identity and verification. So what's the instigator for a customer to reach out to you to explore your technology?
Yeah, so there are three really fundamental needs that we help solve, and why someone would come to us for this kind of tech. The first one is, do I have a KYC, a KYB, or an AML obligation? So these are acronyms that basically any service provider who receives, sends, or transfers money online is responsible for satisfying. So even if it's handled by your payments provider or something like that, you're not directly managing it yourself. It's still one of the reasons why someone would come to us for services and that sort of trust layer. Second would be anyone who wants to maintain a secure ecosystem. So I'm sure a lot of you listeners want to have good users in your ecosystem, in your appliance. And eliminate the fraud that might exist there. So if you think of even Amazon or Meta and how terrible it would be if 90% of that marketplace was overrun by fake buyers and sellers, it doesn't work. And lastly, it's credit. So, any kind of service provider that wants to offer a loan or a facility, you really need to understand the financial profile of a business to provide those types of services. So those are the three core reasons. But companies reach out to Trulioo specifically, I feel like, for many more that I won't, sell you on today and walk you through the whole gamut of it. But for the audience listening that's building your own businesses, what I will say is the most important aspect, at least for B2B. And that's because really we give them confidence. So when it comes to identity and onboarding, it's a very nuanced, complicated system, especially if you're operating in multiple countries. What works in Canada doesn't work in Germany, et cetera. But the services that we provide and the best practices that we can demonstrate, the flexibility with which you can deploy a certain solution, how easy it is to use and how easy it is to understand, that's perfect for a person that's just launched a company or someone that operates in an extremely large enterprise. So whatever you do, and whatever kind of technology or company you run, as long as you're the expert on behalf of the customer, you make their lives easy, you don't sell to them, you just make it predictable and reputable. That's how I think, really at the end of the day, trust can operate as your product.
That's great. Don't edit yourself, Zac. We can tell me all the reasons.
Yeah, all the reasons. Yeah, I'll be here for a while.
Okay, awesome. Mike, let's come over to you. So how, we talked about how trust is really central to your relationship with Vancity members. How does that influence the way you design the digital experiences, manage the data, and choose external technology partners?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think most of us would agree that we wouldn't do business with a bank or a credit union that was known for being insecure and couldn't keep our money safe. So when we're designing systems, we have a long list of security requirements derived from OSFI, Interact, PCI, SWIFT, and NIST. And I would think from a lot of SaaS startup companies, focusing on the NIST side and their controls is going to be foundational to ensuring you have a good security program. Last year, we launched a new digital banking platform. And we spent a lot of time and effort making sure that all those requirements are being met, that the logins were secure and couldn't be brute forced, that the system could not be manipulated, account settings couldn't be modified maliciously, transactions were secure and couldn't be performed on other people's accounts, and confidential information was not revealed. in all that, making sure that we had the visibility into the system, the observability to make sure that we had the right audit logs so that if something was happening, we could explain it. And if we had fraud going on, that we could detect it. On the data side, of course, like security encryption is key. Making sure that anything going over the internet is encrypted. At the data side, when it's being stored, it's also encrypted. And access to that data is only granted to those people that need it, and at the right level too. So it's not just that they have access, but do they need read access? Do they need write access? And making sure that we're auditing that on a continuum basis. And then when we take a look at technology partners, it's really like, can they offer the same level of security that we expect and we implement on our side? Do they have SOC 2 reports? I mean, they're crucial. We don't get the ability to audit at scale our technology partners. So having a SOC 2 report is a way for us to have some assurances that you're doing the right thing. Do you have the right operational controls? Are pen tests being done? And then like certain security features that we would expect out of the box. Single sign-on, for one. There's a challenge with startup companies in that area where that's not a feature necessarily that founders think about. But from a company at scale that has any number of like thousands of employees, we don't want to go in and manage those manually. We want that all to be automated. And then the SOC 2 reports, are there findings? Are there control gaps? And are they repeated year over year, or are they being fixed? It's one thing to have a gap, and companies have them from time to time. But if they're fixed, that creates that trust. But if they continue year over year, then that trust is broken.
That's excellent. Thank you. Tomy, I'll come over to you next. And maybe from Mastercard's perspective, you certainly have that kind of global scale. So I'm curious if we could dive into that with you. Like, how do expectations around trust evolve across regions and regulations and customer types when you think about kind of the global scale of Mastercard?
Yeah, great question. Here at Mastercard, we're one of the world's, if not the world's largest payment network. And we really get to see how identity and fraud and cybersecurity challenges play out across the world and in every region and every type of customer. It's allowed us to really build our cybersecurity and identity solutions products. They're not only world-class, but are practical and grounded into what businesses actually really want. But different markets approach privacy and identity differently. In the EU, there's a huge focus on GDPR, and in Canada, transparency and consent is a bigger focus as well. Expectations also shift depending on the customer type. So if you're a retailer, if you're a merchant, you probably want to have like a really frictionless type of experience versus if you're a bank like Mike's, you guys are probably more focused on audits and being able to explain and retain records and step up where needed. So it's really about ensuring that this product is transparent in terms of the inputs and the outputs, and making sure that you're really consistent. So what we've learned globally, you can apply locally just based on the models that we built. So ensuring that we're able to really explain how our technologies work to our customers and have them apply that same technology to their unique use case is really has been the key to our success.
That's great. Thank you. Matt, as I come over to you, maybe we'll look at customers in terms of the enterprise clients that you serve, that kind of you're selling directly into the enterprise environment. So how does that reality of the enterprise environment shape those customer conversations in your sales cycle?
Thanks, Erica. Well, I think like many of the, my co-panelists today, we're either operating in or building products for highly regulated and compliance-driven environments. And in many ways, that is the challenge we need to meet, and that's the challenge we need to speak to when we're having customer conversations, particularly early in the sales cycle. Many of the co-panelists today have talked about various compliance mandates GDPR, we talked about transparency laws, we talked about encryption requirements, we talked about breach disclosures, we talked about all of these things that frankly have become more and more of a going concern to the extent that they are now dominating board level conversations. And I think that that piece of it being in front of the board and having either shared or personal liability amongst board members and other CXOs of your customer constituents or prospect constituents really raises the bar for how and where a vendor needs to meet those potential buyers. And so being able to tailor your conversation to the things that are truly keeping them up at night, which are, how do I keep my brand reputation intact? How do I keep my members loyal? How do I keep my share price high? How do I maintain my competitive advantage? We need to be able to speak to them with data. So back to trust, with data and demonstrable proof points about how, why, and where we can help them deliver on against those anxieties that they may have and those requirements that they may have.
Excellent. Thank you all. Now I'll move into my next question. It may not be a surprise that there's an AI question on the agenda today. And I appreciate our audience chiming in earlier around their thoughts on where we think, where customers will be looking to in terms of building trust. So I'll come to you. I'm curious to get your perspective. So how do emerging technologies like AI change the trust equation? And what should, founders, or what are you even, thinking about now to stay ahead while remaining really diligent about trust in your organization? So, this is a can of worms. Sorry, I'm opening it up, but I'll pass it. Maybe Matt, I'll come back to you on this one in terms of how is AI changing things for you?
Well, I think AI changes the entire trust equation. You opened today with a panel, a poll, and the number one response that our members gave today was they're looking for proven accuracy and reliability. So that in many ways presupposes that it's not, the accuracy and reliability of the data you get through AI is not proven, right? It's not trusted to begin with. Right. It almost doesn't matter whether we're talking about a business context, a personal context, we're watching the news or reading social media. We all ask the same question. Is it real? Is it real? And that to me is very interesting. A word I keep hearing, week in, week out lately has been veracity. And, that really means, does what I'm hearing conform to facts? Is it backed by data? Is it reinforced by, lived experience or professional experience? Is it real? And I think that really comes to the forefront in the AI equation. And so as we think about, how we're delivering AI into our products, and I'm sure we all are, or consuming AI in and through our tools, that question of, is it real, is always there. We know of AI's propensity to hallucinate. We know of its propensity to fill in the blanks with information that might sound good, but may not be verifiable, in fact. And so we're guarded against that, and we ought to be. And I think that is further exacerbated by a lot of the hype in the industry right now. Do we trust the data? We're not sure yet. And secondly, do we trust the brands, right? Everyone leading with AI. Should we believe the hype? Should we not believe the hype? How much of the hype should we believe? I think these are all core to this really experience about kind of where we're at in the AI cycle right now as it relates to trust.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, I thought the brand would actually be higher. Because for me, I think that's how I usually am evaluating trust when I'm looking at products. But Zac, I'm going to come over to you because you raised it earlier. Is Zac, right? That's what you said in your opening. So talk to us about how AI is changing the trust equation.
Yeah, happy to. First of all, listen, these tools are amazing. So if you aren't using them and pushing the boundaries with your business, it will very likely soon be suffering in one way or another. I think, Matt raised some important points. There are some cautions around using the tools just for the tool's sake. There needs to be meaningful and measurable improvements, right? So So that's the truth, but it's there to be had in my humble opinion. It's also important to remember that, like, at least in our world, in software development, AI ML have been used for years, like in fraud prevention and biometrics and other models and more. But it's important to distinguish now. I think what we're talking about are like AI agents, right? So it's that autonomous execution and a little bit more expansive capabilities. So what should founders or business operators or anyone on the call be thinking about to stay ahead and embed trust in AI? I'll call out three things that will hopefully be helpful. And again, I think about my world of enterprise B2B. So if your world's a little different, maybe they apply more, maybe less. But the first is AI deployments, right? They have to be auditable. You have to create transparency into the decision tree, into your activities, into the operations. Audit trails are essential because someone needs to show their work and answer to the successes or failures of those decisions, especially in regulated environments. The second thing that I often talk to customers about and my team about and think about is AI has to be consistent. It has to demonstrate consistency. And you can guess which answer I gave in the poll. We're building a lot right now, and the interesting challenge is often how to get near identical results, identical reasoning, and decisioning each time. And there are several techniques to get there, but the more sophisticated your agents become, really the harder this gets. And it's important to remember that consistency is really what can increase trust, right? And it's also about mirroring typical human behavior. When we look at the same thing over and over again, we tend to make similar decisions. And when you combine that kind of transparency with anomaly flags, like, it gets really exciting because, again, that's human behavior, how you would typically like run through things. And the last thing I'll share and say is you really need configurability. So it can't be just like a back-end tool that takes, engineers or someone who's specialized to update and change AI in actual business operations. Like, you need some human in the loop capabilities that are right there for analysts or users to touch and feel. They need to be able to update that agent behavior. You have to be able to change those configurations, where you apply and deploy an agent or agentic flows. Put the user in as much control as reasonable. And that will not only set you apart, but that will help really embed trust and get over that hump. So, like, I think for me, it's perhaps a counterintuitive argument, but I really believe that AI has the ability to increase trust in the services that we provide, as long as you sort of follow the three things that I just mentioned.
Excellent. Thanks, Zac. Tomy, what are your thoughts on how AI is changing the trust equation?
Yeah, I love going right after Zac. It makes my job a lot easier here, just because a lot of what he said, I'm going to echo. Well, AI can also be used against you as a company, and a lot of startups out there are not going to have the technology to battle AI fraud. So, for example, it's so easy right now to spin up an identity that's virtually, identical to someone else's. And how are you going to detect that? So, do you have a platform in place that can fight against this AI fraud? Are you equipped to fight AI? So that, the one thing I would really advise is, have a platform in place. Make sure that it's always adapting to the emerging technologies. Here at Mastercard, we catch fraud rings a lot quicker and faster with the use of our models, and that's really helped us get ahead of the curve. And then secondly, as we move more and more into agentic commerce, it's, again, the consistency and being able to get in there early and start thinking about how you're going to identify good agents versus bad agents, and whether or not that's actually linked to that person. Those are all questions that we're going to have to answer. But again, the advice I would say is, are you equipped? Are you ready? And making sure that you're ahead, even though we're always behind, and we can always try to get ready for it, but we know the bad actors are a couple steps ahead of us right now.
That's great. Thanks, Tomy. Really helpful to think about that from the other side. of the business, like what's coming in at you. Mike, I'd love to get your thoughts. We've had some great conversation already, so I'll bring it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here talked a lot about the key points around AI, and there's different levels of AI, right? Like on the machine learning side, that's fairly well defined. Do a lot of regression testing. Weed out the bias, and I think that story is pretty easy to tell. On the Gen AI side, the makers of Gen AI don't even know how the decisions are being made, and the larger the models and the more complex they are, the more variability gets introduced. So, when you're doing testing, like, running lots of regression testing, a small change to a model can completely change the outcomes. And as others mentioned, agentic AI, you have to have a human in the loop, or have the capability to have a human look at it. So those audit logs, the transparency, being able to explain how a decision was being made. I mean, in the financial sector, there are regulations coming that basically mandate that we have to be able to explain how a decision for a loan product or a financial product is being made. So are you able to produce that if you're in that sector? That's a requirement. Doing it at scale, other organizations are building AI agents to monitor the AI agents, right? Because it's not possible to have a human in the loop on everything that's happening. So, different technology, different agents looking at it, and then you have monitoring capabilities on the AI agents that are watching things. And then I think as solution providers and technology companies, what's a story you're going to tell to your customers about your AI and how they can trust the technology you're producing? Do you have a good story for that? I think as a security professional looking for a technology partner, that's something that I'd be looking for. So how can I trust you? Are you verifying things? Those are the questions you'd have to answer.
That's great. Thank you. And maybe I'll stick with you, Mike, for a moment. I wanted to ask maybe for a bit of an example of where maybe regulatory or security requirements helped you strengthen your market position or accelerate growth. So trust was a differentiator or enabled you to open doors or new markets. I'm curious if you had like an example you could share with us.
Yeah, maybe I'll think back to maybe my previous role at a SaaS company that was doing HR analytics. We were a startup company based in Vancouver, targeting Fortune 100 companies. We would get these security questionnaires that were exhaustive. And as a startup company, you don't have all the security things in place, but those security questionnaires are a key insight into what your potential customers are looking for. And, as an agile small company, it's like, okay, I don't have a good answer for that security questionnaire right now. I don't want to cause us to lose the deal. So what can we do right now from a product perspective to make us compliant and answer in a positive note? And so, like, we never lost a deal due to security. And our product teams and development teams knew that security was the number one focus. So they never pushed back on a security requirement. We said, hey, this big prospect is coming in. They have this deal. I need to be able to answer yes to this question. Can we do it? And in the next agile sprint, we put that feature in.
That's an excellent example. Yeah. And great for our folks on the line to be thinking about who you're selling to, right? And what are they going to need you to demonstrate to trust you as a provider. Tomy, I'll come over to you next. I'm curious from your experience, maybe you could share an example of where that, maybe that trust equation helped strengthen your market position.
Sure. I can give a couple examples, maybe one in Canada first. The updated B10 guidelines for banks has really raised expectations across Canada, making sure that these financial institutions are disciplined and that they're abiding by third-party risk management. For us, it really put us in a good position. One of our companies here in Canada was already ahead of that curve, and they were able to support their customers comply with that regulatory framework. In the US, ensuring that we're compliant with not doing business with any foreign adversaries, and ensuring that we're really compliant to the new standards that were introduced in the last 2 years, also help our customers ensure that they're compliant with those same standards. So it really positioned Mastercard to be a leader in the industry, as all of our data and all of our technology was really compliant with the new regulations.
That's great when the hard work pays off, for sure. Matt, do you have any kind of specific examples? And I mean, I know you've been with Absolute for quite a while and have a rich history, but I'm curious what examples you might share.
Well, there are so many, really. But, a few that really come to mind is, certainly over the last decade, maybe more, what we've seen is, particularly in the US, demands upon organizations to disclose breaches. And those breaches have in turn translated directly into monetary fines. And they're levied liberally, particularly in the US. So customers are highly liable for these types of events. So our technology has been used to really shut those down proactively. Is that we have the ability to track from a firmware level instances of patient health information or other personally identifiable data or student information or other types of data that would be at-risk data elements on these devices. We also have the ability to track when these devices are in an unencrypted state and to reinforce a state of encryption on these devices when perhaps they're not encrypted. They're insulating that customer from some of those fines. Again, the ability to take action on those devices and wipe them and provide certificates of sanitization help when these organizations are in front of authorities and needing to disclose a potential breach. If they're backstopped by a firmware level certificate of sanitization on the device, that gives them much greater power to help defend against these sorts of fines. And I think even in more recent memory, taking some of those same concepts and applying them to some of the geopolitical environment we're in, and devices that might move in or out of high risk or sanctioned countries where an organization may not want their devices to be, much less the data on them, much less, again, those devices in an unencrypted state. So we don't just have the ability to observe that, we've got the ability to lock it down and prevent the accident from happening before it occurs.
Amazing. Zac, I'll pass it over to you for some useful examples, maybe from your experience.
Oh, there are many. Whether it's lovely FinTrack growing our business every day with more definitions of who is a regulated entity, or whether it's the Digital Service Act in Europe around very large online platforms, or whether it's what's the latest age verification in Australia, the UK, maybe coming right home to Canada around how do you verify and who do you allow access. Yeah, when your business is compliance and risk, almost every single regulation is good for business. But if you want business advice, so I think for listeners, if your company operates even adjacently to a regulated or a security environment, listen, it's a very good plan is to build an information suite or use the new tooling like an agent that monitors and summarizes these major regulation changes, and stay on top of what those changes are and build simple software tools or simple solutions that help SMBs manage them easily, because nothing scares small companies more than having to invest money into all of these adherence and complicated webs of operations to make sure that they satisfy these regs. And nothing scares large companies more than being on the front page of a fine or some kind of reputational risk. And having to update their internal systems, which often is a lot of legacy architecture, legacy process, complicated webs of business operations. So if you can stay on top of these, if you can understand where they're headed and why and what they mean and who's the target, and you can package up simple, elegant solutions to these scary problems, it's a highly repeatable go-to-market strategy. And the last thing I'll say is what I tell everyone who will listen around regulations is they are essentially meant to protect the consumer and protect the financial ecosystem. So I never think of them as a bad thing. I think of them as an enabler, as long as, again, you have the right solutions partner and provider. So that's what I'll say on that subject.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I'm just kind of keeping track of the time. I have seen a couple of questions come into the chat, so I might transition to take a few of those now. One that I thought was interesting was a question that asks, how do customers usually signal when trust is starting to break down? Or how do you know, or how do you get those signals? How do you track it? Maybe how do you respond? But I'm curious if I could get one or a couple folks panel here to come to that question. Matt, you're unmuted, so I'll come to you.
Oh, that might have been a natural reflex. Sorry. Oh, wow. Okay, great. I think that's a great question. When trust is starting to break down, I think it's going to come at you one of two ways. It's either going to be really loud or really quiet. And you've got a different response on each of them. The really loud is, you've broken my trust, right? You were a trusted partner, and now you're in a state of heightened escalation. And that's the situation in which you need to earn back trust by owning the issue, taking swift swift responses, frequency of communication. I would treat that like a trust crisis. The second one is almost scarier, because that's when you don't have a chance to earn it back. It's when they get really quiet and they start to back away. And that one is, the customer goes in that sort of green to gone type of scenario. And the trust has whatever the event was has broken the trust such that they may be out shopping for another partner, or have already shopped for another partner, and that's why it's so quiet. So you have to be really guarded against those kinds of kind of the absence of signal and noise from a customer. But certainly when you hear that noise, to respond very proactively, all hands on deck.
That's excellent. Thank you, Matt. Does anyone else want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick. I mean, from my perspective, we have a pretty robust third-party risk management team. And, part of that indicators of maybe I'm at risk is when, my team starts reaching out to you about your compliance, your security findings. Those for us are leading indicators that you could be at risk of a breach. Your SOC 2 report, am I following up with your teams because there's findings? And then I think, kind of like what Matt was saying, like green to gone, the scary thing is just like the silent quitters. In the financial sectors, that's just members closing their bank accounts and going to another financial institution. They might not even have a discussion with you about it. They're just going to up and leave. Or if you're a SaaS company, they're just not going to renew, or they're going to limit the term of the renewal from maybe a 3-year to a 1 year because they need time to move off. They've just given up. So I think those are some of the things I'd be concerned about.
That's great. Maybe I'll move to the next question, and happy to have, again, anyone who wants to jump in on it. Mike, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm not surprised our audience is asking, how do startups best position themselves to sell to technology buyers? And I think they're referring to the 4 of you, as well as others. You've talked a little bit about some of those security requirements, the things that you look for, but I'd love to get some of your input on, what companies who are maybe early startups here in Vancouver, they want to sell into larger organizations. What are some of the things they can be thinking about? Mike, you're off mute, but I can come to Zac.
I can jump in right here because I've been on both sides. I've been in the software tech space for 20 plus years, 10 of which was in a SaaS company, and I've been on the enterprise side for 15 of that. So I would say, you want to sell to me. I'm the part of a group of people. I'm not maybe the only people, but from a security perspective, I'm going to have a significant amount of input into whether or not your product is secure or not. So can you answer all my questions in a positive manner? And where you can't, be open about it. Don't hide it. And do you have a plan to maybe add those features that I'm looking for? Like I said before, some technology partners don't have single sign-on or log shipping. Those are kind of the 2 things I see most often with technology companies. where they don't have it yet. Again, managing thousands of users accessing your product, I can't go in and manually go set them up in your product. I want to be able to have it automated going into your system. They have a profile, right? So can you answer that in the positive? Do you have a SOC 2 report, or are you following ISO 27001 or some other framework? And do you have a third-party attestation regarding that? If you don't have a third-party attestation, I have no way to validate that what you're doing is what you say you're doing. That's pretty much a requirement. We've turned away vendors that can't provide that. Even large ones, like we had one a couple of years ago with TELUS. TELUS had a SOC 2 for their data center, but the service they were selling was around hardware security modules. They did not have a SOC 2 themselves for that piece of service. They were just saying, oh, we have a SOC 2 because TELUS has the SOC 2. That doesn't cover your service, right? So you have to have a report that covers your service offering. One, you're relying on other parties. They need to have a SOC 2 or something similar likewise. So you need to have your bases covered in terms of like all things around security. And there might be additional requirements based on which sector you're targeting. For financial institutions, that's OSFI in Canada. If you're processing payment data, that's PCI. And do you have your attestation of compliance? And there's, I think, 250 different controls in that you need to have in place. If you're going into the healthcare sector, do you know all the regulations around HIPAA? Do you have the right team behind you supporting you for security reporting? Do you have a response plan for breaches? Like, it's not a matter of if or, it's just a matter of when you're going to get breached. So are you prepared for that? Can you give me confidence that you're ready to handle that?
That's great. Thanks, Mike. Zac, I'll let you take in here.
Yeah, so my first thing, I think Mike's got a really good point for all the startups out there. So like Trulioo started as a very, I was there when we were very, very, very small, and we had big customers to begin with. And the first thing I paid a lot of attention to was our ISO and our SOC. So having that is key. That being said, I would recommend, like, you really need to have a champion in the business, like, that wants to buy your solution. And so what I mean is, like, you should be, as a startup with minimal resources, you should really be fine tuning and chasing your product market fit above anything else. And you should choose those customers where you believe that what you're providing really solves perfectly for their solution, like for their challenge, their need. Why do I say that? I say that because as a startup, nothing's going to be perfect on the security side. Nothing's going to be perfect on the solution side. You're not going to have the same kind of resources as a larger business. So if you really nail that business buyer and you really nail that product market fit for your solution, guess what? You're going to get a little bit more rope to then answer and solve for all those other pieces to get the enterprise buyer on side. But you need that champion that's going to say, no, it's a great solution. It's exactly what we need. Let's give them the 3 months or 30 days or whatever it is to remediate all of these different situations. So that would be the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is you just got to crush your customers with love when you're small. And what I mean by that is, like, you don't want to bend over backwards in the wrong way and try and sell your solution and waste cycles and years of selling that doesn't work. You have to get buyers who are going to buy a little bit quicker. So maybe if you're a startup, as much as I love selling to banks, like, it wasn't the first thing that I did. But no matter what, we provided the best responsiveness, best customer service. We answered as truthfully as we understood, but then we followed up time and time again. So I think if you combine those two things, you'll get more rope on the back end to solve the more meaningful criteria for enterprise buyers.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thanks for our audience for your questions. We're not going to get to all of them today, but I'm glad we got through those two that I thought were really, really well suited for the panel. So we're kind of coming to our close, and this has been excellent. I think I've heard so many lessons on scaling secure, verified tech. So I thank the four of our panelists. I have one closing question. Of course, we know we have many startups on the line, and they're very ambitious. Your organizations are at scale. today, and certainly there's many lessons learned that apply from what you've seen, and hopefully lots of folks learned a lot from being on the call today. But I'd ask each of you maybe if you could sum up or share a key takeaway you'd like the audience to take from this call. Mike, I'll come to you first, just for a quick takeaway for our audience.
Yeah, I think as a startup, that doesn't have a large amount of resources to throw at things. Tone at the top matters from a security perspective. Your founder, your CEO, your CTO need to be able to say security is the number one issue. If we get breached, we're done. It's a life ending event. Large companies with brand reputation can take a hit. They might lose customers, but that's not going to put them out of business. For a small company, you could die. Security teams need to lead and work with product teams and development teams to make things happen, but everybody in the organization needs to be responsible for security. But if you don't have that tone at the top, people are going to push back. Product teams are going to say, we need to get the feature out, but security is going to put a back seat. The gremlins are going to come out to play, and something's going to happen, and trust is going to be broken.
The stakes are high. Tomy, what do you think?
I think you should really put trust as, foundation from day one. Ensure that you have, for those who are in this space, a platform that can really verify your users and, really ensure that it is who they say they are. And then if you are going to do that type of workflow, ensure that you're able to transparently say what type of data you're collecting, where it's going, how long you're retaining it, and be really transparent with your customers. And then finally, again, what Zac said, make sure that you are going to differentiate via service, always respond to your customers, be at the forefront of that conversation. And it's the only way you can really differentiate yourselves from others.
That's excellent. Thank you. Zac, your closing thoughts.
Wow. Yeah, geez. I think honestly, I would just re-emphasize exactly what Mike and Tomy basically said. I think it comes from the top. That's very, very important. Whatever your culture is, whatever your decision trees and criteria are, if trust, and we're talking about leveraging trust as a product and solution, like Tomy was saying, or instilling trust in sort of your business operations, like Mike was, it's very important that your senior leadership is permeating that, and that's where it will just become part of your culture and part of your team's operating environment. I'll just stop there.
Excellent. Thank you. Matt, you're going to get the last word.
Okay. Well, if I were a startup, or a founder on the call today, I'd actually might find a lot of this very daunting, right? There's just a ton of requirements, regulations, and acronyms and enterprises to wade through here. So this could be very, very daunting. So my guidance would be, twofold. Is one, make sure that you're partnering with, tool sets, providers where appropriate, like, Microsoft or Azure or AWS. They're going to give you a lot of benefit to the product that you may already have today from a security and compliance perspective. So they might get you partway there. I understand not everyone can afford that, but that's certainly that kind of a path can be very helpful. But I think more importantly is focus on, as an early stage company, is focus on design wins. And maybe that's just a different way of saying what Zac was talking about before, but that's finding a customer who's got a unique problem that you can uniquely solve, that wants to partner with you in all your imperfection and understand you in your imperfection, but the spirit in which you approach them, the vigor, the entrepreneurship, and that spirit of partnership to really help them win in their organization. So that might make you have to be more flexible and more adaptable in your go-to-market, but you can really, let these customers and these champions guide you, and you can partner with these customers to help build now what will eventually become your forever product. And so really focus on those design wins to help kind of get you in the door with these organizations. And two of our panelists said you might get a little bit more leeway in those kinds of conversations from a security perspective, Mike in particular. And I think that's spot on.